This song came as a suggestion from Martin, a long-time subscriber. Thank you, Martin. An excellent suggestion it is, although I will say it's not an easy song to play. You'll find simpler arrangements on YouTube. For me, arranging these songs for guitar is often treading a fine line between creating something that's playable, especially something that wasn't originally written for the guitar, but something also that captures enough of the kind of authentic flavour of the original. This is a case in point. So what I'm going to do, I'll talk you through all the chords, but I'm going to provide some alternative chords where I can, some options that might be a bit more straightforward, or others where you're going to be a bit more adventurous and create a bit more colour. So I'm just going to go through, I've got a little list of those. There are other chords in the song, things like this diminished chord here and this augmented chord and so on, where you really don't have too much choice. You've just got to bite the bullet and get those under your fingers. But for now, let's just look at some of the more straightforward chords. Capo on the 3rd fret. The original key is E flat, which isn't great for the guitar, so we're going to play it as if we're in C, and I'm going to start with a C chord. Now that's fine, but if you wanted to add a bit more, and it's a kind of a pre-war jazz feel to this, C6 is a really good bet. Okay, whenever you see a C chord in this song, think of playing a C6 instead. C major 7 isn't going to really work. That's not, you got a friend in me. It's not really that kind of a song. C6 is the one you want. You could play C6 this way, which is barring across the 5th fret on the top 4 strings, and then I've got a finger on the 3rd fret of the 5th string as well. I'll probably finish the song with that shape, but for me, C or C6 is going to work. C7, there's quite a lot of C7 in this song as well. Now, C7's fine, but C9, again, that just adds a little bit of flavour. So when you see 7, you could play a C9 or you could play C7. It doesn't really matter. Next, I've got a D7, and that D7, it's a little bit basic maybe. That kind of feels a bit too bright. If I take my C7 shape and move it up 2 frets, there's a really good D7 there. That's a slightly mellower sound because it just uses the middle 4 strings. But again, like C7 to C9, you could play, instead of D7, you could play D9. For G7, again, that feels a little bit folksy, that shape there. It works. This G7, which is an E-type bar chord barred on the 3rd fret, that's not bad. But how about G13? And a couple of ways to play that. If I add a finger to the 3rd fret of the 4th string, that's an F, which takes the place of that note that was on the top string 1st fret. It's now there, and I can leave the top 3 strings open, so I have root 3, flat 7, root 3, 6, which effectively gives me a 13. That's really lovely. And as we'll see later, as we get out of the bridge, there's one note there on the word boy, where actually it is that note. So you can hit that chord and that helps to pitch that note in the vocal. Alternatively, this is a more useful shape, perhaps because you can play that in different places on the neck. 1st finger's on the 3rd fret of the bottom string, 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the 4th string, and the 3rd finger's on the 4th fret of the 3rd string. That creates my G7, and then my little finger is going to play on the 5th fret of the 2nd string, and that's my G13. That's not a bad way of playing that chord, and that just adds some colour. When you see G7, think maybe G13 this way or this way. I've also got an A7 here, and the most straightforward way of playing A7 is perhaps this. But again, you could be playing a bar chord, or else this isn't bad. Don't see enough of this shape. This is nice and bright, and here, that's what you want. That's the 2nd fret on the 4th, 3rd and 2nd strings barred, a 2nd fret, and then I've got a finger on the 3rd fret of the top string. Okay, that's it for now, but as I say, as we go through the songs, there will be some unavoidable unpleasantness with the fingers where we need to get our hands on some of the more nifty shapes. Now we'll look at the famous instrumental intro section that I've arranged for fingerpicking guitar. We'll look at that separately in a moment. For now, let's just focus on a very simple finger picking pattern that we can play pretty much throughout the whole song. It's a basic Travis picking pattern, and I'm using a C chord as an example here. There's lots of C in this song. My thumb is going to be on the 5th string for C. If it were a G chord, for instance, or an E or something, it would be down on the 6th string, but for now it's on the 5th string. I've got my first finger on the 3rd string and my second finger on the 2nd string. And it's thumb, 2nd finger. Then I'm going to move my thumb up to the 4th string, alternating with the 1st finger. So 5th string, 2nd string, that's thumb and 2nd finger. 4th string, 3rd string, that's thumb and 1st finger. And like I say, if we're playing something like a G, my thumb initially would move down to the 6th string. And there's going to be quite a lot of working out where the bottom note of the chord needs to be and moving the thumb accordingly. And the other thing to say is that this is actually swung, so it's not 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and like this. It's 1 ba-dum, 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 ga-dum, ga-dum, almost like a triplet feel. And I'll probably be using this pattern to demonstrate the chords as we go through the various sections. That's why I want to get this out of the way now. We kick off in the verse with half a bar each of C, or your C6 if you like, to G7 augmented. Now, if you remember the G13 we had a minute ago, that little finger, if that were to move down a fret, that would be G7 flat 13 or G7 sharp 5, or indeed G7 augmented, because they amount to the same thing. 2 beats on each of those, and then we get back to our C, or C6. You got a friend in me, to C7, or C9, of course. So altogether, you got a friend in me. Okay, now if you move those chords just a little bit early and pick up some unexpected accents with the finger picking, you'll create some syncopation that'll just make the whole thing a little bit more lively, a bit more authentic. We're going to see that sequence a little bit. In fact, there are kind of 2-bar blocks that sort of repeat in different places. The next one is F, to F sharp diminished, to C over G, to C9, C7 or C9. The F chord is an E-shaped bar at the 1st fret, and I'm going to leave that bar there. I'm going to put my 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the bottom string, and my 3rd finger is going to come onto the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. You'll notice a lot of these shapes, I'm only using 4 strings because I've got my thumb and my 3 picking fingers. Thumb's on the 6th string and I'm picking the 2nd, 3rd and 4th. F, F sharp diminished. You can see how leaving that bar there kind of helps. In fact, for this chord, you actually only need a bar across the 2nd and 4th strings in front of what's going on the 3rd string, but it's more trouble and it's worth to move it, and that gives me a bit more leverage there. F to F sharp diminished, C over G to C7 or C9, and that is the bass we want. You got a friend in me. Now we've got a 2-bar sequence that again we're going to see a fair bit of, and it repeats. It's F, when the road, to C over E this time, so it's open bottom string. When the road looks E7 over G sharp, rough ahead to A minor. And that E7 over G sharp, you could play a straight E7, but you know it's a shame not to have that G sharp there, because again we've got this rising bass line. When the road looks, that G sharp leads us up to the following A minor. And for the E7 over G sharp, 1st finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, 2nd finger on the 4th fret of the bottom string, and my 3rd finger is on the 4th fret of the 3rd string. So that 2-bar section is when the road looks rough ahead, and it repeats, and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed. Now we've got a 7-bar sequence. This is probably the trickiest part of the song, where we've got pretty much 1 chord per beat. Chords that we've already seen, but even so. F, F sharp diminished, C over G, E7 over G sharp, and you can see how that bass notes coming up, and then there's a very quick F7 to E7. Probably don't really need the F7 there, and that's only half a beat, but it's kind of nice to get it in there. But just remember what your old pal said. Yeah, you got a friend in me. So we finished that with D7, G7, C to A7. You got a friend in me. And again, D7, G7, C. You got a friend in me. At which point we have part of the original intro as an instrumental interlude before we go to the second verse. But just before we finish that, let's look at this D7, G7, C business. In fact, this is what we call a circle of fifths sequence. These chords, the A7 leads to a D, the D7 leads to a G, the G7 leads back to a C. And it's quite nice in a sequence like this to work the bass a little bit. If you look at the D7, the way I'm playing it this way, my bass note is played with the third finger on the 5th fret of the 5th string. Now I could either slide up to that, just by moving down a fret and up again, or even walk up chromatically. If I take my first finger and put it on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, 2nd finger on the 4th fret, then I land with my 3rd finger on the 5th fret and I can form the shape behind it. Okay, because I've walked up, naturally assigning each finger to a different fret. And in fact, when we go to the G13, if I'm playing that with my first finger, playing the bass note, I can do the opposite. So now I'm going to step across with my 3rd finger on the 5th fret of the bottom string and move chromatically down. Onto C, and again chromatically down to the A7. So that kind of a thing. And if that feels like a lot, maybe just slide up. So slide up or play a note a fret below. These are called approach notes, by the way. That kind of thing, that works really nicely. And build that into your picking if you like. Okay, let's have the whole of the first verse. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal said. You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. And then we have, as I say, 3 bars of the instrumental, which we'll look at a little later. Okay, into the second verse. The second verse begins exactly the same way. It's a little shorter, and we get this. You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. The first 8 bars, there's nothing new. You got in troubles, I got them too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. Now we've got the same thing again. F, C over E, E7 over G sharp, A minor. We stick together, we can see it through. That's easy enough. And again, D7, G7, C. Oh, you got a friend in me to A7. Yeah, you got a friend in me. So that's actually a little bit easier. Let's just have that. We end with a C7 or C9 that takes us into the bridge, which begins with an F. So here's the whole of the second verse. You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. You got in troubles, I got them too. There isn't anything that I wouldn't do for you. We stick together, we can see it through. 'Cause you got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. So as you see in the second verse, there's nothing new at all. Right, how are we doing? We've got to the bridge, finally. We've got a bar of F and then an odd change to B7. That's kind of nice. Some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am. 2 beats each of C, B7, and back to C for a bar. If you play C6, you can actually leave that finger, the third finger on the second fret of the third string, leave that put from the C6 to B7, back to C6. For the B7, strictly speaking, there's no need to play that top string unless you're strumming, because I'm going to miss that out. So anyway, some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too. Now we've got 2 bars of B7, and in case you're thinking, well, that's the easy bit, well, wait and see. Well, none of them will ever love you. Fine. If you were going to play that, and that's the kind of more straightforward version, you could alternate the 5th string down to the 6th string. But none of them will ever love you. And that's perfectly fine to do that. But the original, there's a little kind of shift in the harmony upwards in the orchestration. We get this. After B7, we're going to get a note moving up to C sharp, then up to D, then up to D sharp. And it's like this. We get our B7, then we get an A chord with C sharp in the bass. All of this is happening on the middle 4 strings. And none of them. Then that shape moves up a single fret, and we get a finger coming down on the 3rd string for our D minor 6, which is what that is. And then it's B with D sharp in the bass. But none of them will ever love you. As I say, you could just play the straight B7. None of them will ever love you. But you know, once you've heard none of them will ever love you, how can you resist that? 2 bars of E minor 7 to 2 beats of E minor 7 to A7, 2 beats of D minor 7 to G7. So all that, if you know, is a 3-6-2-5. E minor 7 to A7, D minor 7 to G7, and of course you can play that as you like. D minor 7 here is an A minor 7 shaped barred on the 5th fret, for instance. That's the whole of the bridge, so let's just have that. Some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, maybe, but none of them will ever love you the way I do. It's me and you, boy. That note there, that 13, boy, there it is, sorry, that helps me with my vocals. But none of them will ever love you the way I do. It's me and you, boy. Okay, into the final verse, which is very much the same as what we've already done. C, G augmented, back to C. And as the years go by, all that, friendship will never die. Now we get the same thing we've had before. F, F sharp diminished, C over G. You're gonna see it's our destiny. E7 over G sharp to A minor, and the whole thing kind of stops for a second there, so there's a little pause. You're gonna see it's our destiny. Then it picks up again, D7, G7, C, and all that stuff. You got a friend in me. Yeah, you got a friend in me. And one more. You got a friend in me. And then we get into the instrumental, so maybe it's time to look at that now. So the instrumental section that I've arranged for a finger-picking guitar, it's basically 3 bars long, and then there's a different ending each time it occurs. It happens 3 times. In the intro to the song, then there's an interlude at the end of the first verse, and then it closes out the song as well. In the intro, we get this 3-bar sequence, and then we get another 2 bars. Let's just look at the basic 3-bar sequence. If you were going to play just the chords rather than the finger-picked arrangement, you're going to play 2 beats of C to E7 with B in the bass, so you're missing out the bottom string, A minor, and then an A flat 7, and I'm playing that as an E7 bar chord on the 4th fret. Okay, now we get C over G for 2, and then G7 augmented for 2. And we end on a C. Every time that sequence ends on a C, and then something slightly different happens. Okay, in the intro, the 2 bars that finish it, that take us into the verse, are this: C, G7 augmented, and then G minus 7, or B flat over G or something, and back again. And I'm just moving my 3rd and 4th fingers down from the 4th fret to the 3rd fret and back again, although I find that tricky. If you're used to playing this shape, G minus 7, I find it easier to refinger that whole thing. But it depends on you. Okay, so that's all of that. You got a friend, and we kick off the first verse. However, if you wanted to pick it through, it's not so tricky. The A flat 7 is a little devious, but that's the solution I've found. It's like this. Start with a standard C shape, and I'm going to pick the bass note on the 5th string, then straight up the 4th string, 3rd string, 2nd string, and I'm going to add a note on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. That's all it is. Now I've got a pair of notes, 2nd fret of the 5th string, 4th fret of the 2nd string, up to the open top string. Okay. In the 2nd bar, I've got my A minor. I'm actually going to catch the note on the 2nd string just before the beginning of the new bar. Okay, then the 5th string, then the 4th and 3rd strings together. So up to now. Now we carry on. And the A flat 7, you don't need to play the whole of it, because I'm picking the bottom string and the 2nd, 3rd and 4th string, so that note there on the 5th string isn't necessary. But that's it. You want to bring out the note on the 2nd string, and what happens is we get this to this, but I'm going to pick that note on the 3rd string, 7th fret on the 3rd string instead. Okay, that's a tricky section. So the whole of it up to that point. Okay, at the very end of that bar we catch a note on the 1st fret of the 2nd string, and then we go down to play our C over G. That's bare bones. I'm just going to play a note on the 3rd fret of the bottom string as the melody comes down. 1st fret on the 2nd string, open 3rd string, 4th fret on the 4th string, catching that with my little finger, going to bring my little finger down to the 3rd fret, and that all resolves onto that C chord. So, the whole thing. That makes me stick my tongue out. I find that tricky. Up to speed. You got a friend. And we're off. And we get exactly the same thing at the end of the first verse and again at the end of the song. For the first verse, there's no tag at all. It just goes straight into the 2nd verse. So we get this. You just remembered what your old pal said. Yeah, you got a friend in me. Oh, you got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. And at the end of the song, we get the same thing. You got a friend in me. Oh, you got a friend in me. And I'll probably end that with a nice C6 to finish the whole thing off. Well, we got there. That's the whole thing. Let's have a playthrough. I've got a backing track that I've made. It's just piano, bass and drums, but it's exactly like the original. We have the intro, verse 1 with that tag, second verse, into the bridge, third verse, again with a tag, and it finishes. I'll play along with the backing track, and then I'll add the backing track as an instrumental version at the end of the video so you can play along at your leisure. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice warm bed. You just remember what your old pal said. Yeah, you got a friend in me. 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 You got troubles, I got 'em too. There isn't anything that I wouldn't do for you. We stick together, we can see it through. Boy, you got a friend in me. Yeah, you got a friend in me. Some of the folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, maybe, but none of them will ever love you the way I do, just me and you, boy. And as the years go by, the friendship will never die. You're gonna see it's our destiny. You got a friend in me. Oh, you got a friend.